Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and deceased. It is I, Emily Sophia, aka Mighty Sophia, here to break down for you guys the latest episode of The Walking Dead. We are on Season 7, Episode 3, The Cell. So, spoiler alert before I dive into the mad thick of things, as I shall be endeavoring to bear all in this review. And just in case you have missed my coverage of and responses to the previous 2 episodes of this season of The Walking Dead, you can find the link to that playlist in the description below, among a myriad of other links to playlists and things that I have done and talked about. So without further ado, let us get into the business of tonight's episode. So, it is evident from these first 3 episodes that the writers and showrunners this season are breaking things up and kind of shifting focus episode by episode to our disparate groups, which is honestly a pacing tactic that I don't particularly mind. I've seen a couple reviewers talking about this episode and kind of complaining about that structure and approach, and I can see why for some it would be less appealing, especially since we are anxious to see how the core group with Rick and company, how they are all dealing with the fallout of the loss of Abraham and Glenn. I, however, have been very glad that we have removed ourselves from that atrocity a bit and come up for air, which I'm pretty sure is what the showrunners were looking to do, is to kind of shift focuses, take stock of the situation the situations plural that all of our different characters are facing, and then working our way back to how Rick and Maggie and Sasha and everyone are going to deal with coming to heel in the regime of Negan and the Saviors. This was a really interesting episode in that we got to see a specific character, Dwight, kind of deepened and humanized, which is something that I appreciate because one of the many bad habits that The Walking Dead needs so desperately to break in the forthcoming episodes and seasons, assuming that there shall be many seasons after this, or at least a few, is the need to really develop the new characters that they bring into the mix. Or rather, the characters that haven't been there since, like, the first, say, 3 seasons, or whatever you want to define as the early days of The Walking Dead. Because we get a lot of these characters that are brought in and introduced and then kind of sidelined, and then all of a sudden they get like a really cool, in-depth, focused episode that is all their own. They take the stage, and then they bite the bullet. I think of characters like Denise, who technically, Denise, one of the Alexandrians and the doctor in that community, she got a few episodes where she kind of had the spotlight here and there. But the show has a bad habit of really honing in on certain characters before they get offed. And, you know, what's the harm in getting to spend time with one of those newer characters and not killing them off right away? You know what I'm saying? Keep things a little less predictable, you know? So Dwight got an interesting focus this week, and for as many stupid and horrendous things as he has done in the past, I would say that coming out on the other side of this episode, he is arguably more sympathetic. He's not a great and admirable fellow and makes a lot of unsavory choices in this episode that still make it difficult to really feel like you can be on his team. But the way that he was kind of aligned with and juxtaposed with the character of Daryl was quite thought-provoking, I would say. And it's pretty dang apparent from this episode that Dwight basically wants to be Daryl. He has everything that Daryl has had and the things that have made him so iconic, from his vest with the broken angel wings to his motorcycle, to his crossbow. He's got all the material things that scream Daryl Dixon. And yet there is one core facet that is dividing the two, in which makes them very different from one another. And that is that Dwight is a man who has successfully been broken in by Negan. Now, there are hints that he could still, maybe partake in a future insurrection and maybe become a dissenter once again, because as we learned at one point, he did run away from Negan, came back with his tail between his legs, and lost his wife and half his face. So, he is a man who has been broken, and he has not succeeded at breaking Daryl. And what he wants to see is that someone so adversarial to Negan could also bend the knee and become a part of the savior system. He wants to have his own actions and choices validated, the things that he did to survive and to continue living in this veritable wasteland of a world, but at least be able to say that he is alive. In the flesh, with his brain intact and heart pumping. But Daryl is not a man whose instincts will allow him to simply roll over and succumb and cede what he has to such a malevolent person. It's kind of funny because part of me towards the beginning of the episode was like, man, we're going to go this entire time and Daryl's going to just hold his ground and, things that you want him to do. But I was also like, come on, man, just pay the lip service, do the thing, and then stab him in the back, little subterfuge. Come on, Daryl, you can do it, my man. But he refuses. And I am really glad that he verbalized why he refused to Dwight. And I think that the statement that he made is going to have an impact on Dwight's choices in the future, whether he's going to continue trying to play the role of one of Negan's top men, or if he is going to go his own way. Stick it to the man, stick it to Lucille, make off with his wife, Sherry, and, call off this whole disgusting affair that he has found himself embroiled in. So as far as a character study goes, this was a very cool episode, and I think in the grand scheme of things, very necessary as well. And so while there was some strange part of me that was hoping that Daryl would ultimately be like, yeah, I'm Negan, whatever, and then kind of come into his own, gain his strength back, and ultimately become the lethal thorn in Negan's side, I could see that Daryl's endgame is very different. And of course, the key factor in this is that he is grappling with the fact that his actions brought about the death of one of his best friends, Glenn. So it absolutely makes sense that he would cling on to his identity, because his identity as Daryl, that is the only version of himself in which he can properly mourn his friend and consider his actions. Like, he needs to dwell in this. He needs to be enmeshed in this, because if he simply pays lip service to Negan up front and tries to climb the corporate ladder in this fucked up system, like, it's going to poison him. Absolutely. Even more so than enduring the torture that Negan has had in store. And so I was pretty nervous about this episode, because I was like, man, it's gonna be a freaking Daryl torture session. I can't deal with this business. Nope. Not whatsoever, especially after the premiere. Like I said, I am very, very happy that we have taken a step back, a breather, if you will. But yeah, I'm pretty excited to see where things go from here, and we will ultimately be looping back to the core group soon, but to really shine the light on Daryl and where he is at and what he is going through and the dark corner that he has been pressed into. It's grueling stuff, but I think it was handled overall very well. Interesting to get to see him interact with Dwight's ex-wife, Sherry, who seems to have a good deal of sympathy for Daryl in his state and adamantly tries to encourage him to just take those punches and to make those sacrifices, knowing that she herself had to do the abhorrent thing of leaving her partner in order to save his life. And is now part of this sick harem that Negan has established at, oh my gosh, what is the name of the Savior's headquarters? It's the Sanctuary, right? I'm pretty dang sure it is. If I am incorrect, do not kill me, which, I mean, you can't really do through the internet, but nonetheless, I am asking you, please. At any rate, so, Sherry, I could see her becoming a power player further down the line. One neat moment that stood out among numerous others in the episode was when Sherry and Dwight met one another in the hallway, you know, kind of their black and shadowy figures sharing a couple of cigarettes and reflecting on, well, basically they were playing what I would call the lie game, where they just speak lies back and forth to one another and affirm those lies, because that's basically how their small talk convo went down in that dim corridor. But yeah, so she is as deep in this business as Dwight is, and to even get a fraction of the story of where they've been through, of course, the ever talkative lips of Negan is pretty affecting stuff. Ultimately taking Dwight, this character whose penis we were very glad to see bitten harshly by Eugene in the previous season. Now we're like, oh yeah, here's what's going on with the rest of the guy who is attached to that damaged schlong. and we see too the undercurrents of abuse that Dwight has gone through with Negan, and for as many perks that come with the territory of being a leading figure in Negan's world, there's also quite a few downsides, as is evidenced by the guy who tried to make a break for it, and Dwight offered to go and track that man down. Somebody who he used to maybe call a friend or a close acquaintance. And finally, we get a little bit of insight into a guy who simply can't handle this business anymore. You know, because there are quite a few questions stirring around the fan community, especially among people such as myself who haven't read the comics. How is it that a guy like Negan could successfully take power? Especially considering people like Ezekiel. You know, we understand the legacy that he's trying to establish. We understand how he was able to draw a following unto himself with having this tiger and kind of painting himself as this mythical figure, but then also offering the benefits of life and vitality and whatever else. But yeah, so here's a little case study of a man who tries to buck the system, who tries to get out of this madness, and even says, hey, how is it that we haven't all risen up against this asshole? Like, for real? Our numbers far exceed the number of actual Negans in the game. You know, everybody says that they are Negan. At least in specific circumstances, of course. We think of the past season where Rick killed someone who he thought was Negan, saying it was Negan. Y'all know the drill. But anyway, this guy raises a pretty good point. But that also makes the question of the ways in which Negan was able to condition his followers, balancing striking fear into these people, offering them resources and assets and things that they need, and manipulating them and charming them and brutalizing them. Negan certainly offers a very multifaceted brand of madness. And now the question is Dwight, in dealing with this situation with his former friend and comrade, who he ultimately killed, and also in trying to break Daryl, is this going to be the straw that breaks his back and wakes him up to the reality that there is more to living than being alive, to quote one of my favorite Anne Boleyn songs. Basically, every Anne Boleyn song is my favorite Anne Boleyn song. So, anyway. Overall, an enjoyable and thought-provoking episode that leads me to believe that perhaps this season is going in an okay direction. I am both looking forward to and not looking forward to seeing what's going on with the group. Just in the midst of such a mind-blowing loss in the premiere, part of me just doesn't want to go back. I am such a weenie. But anyways, yeah. Way to go, Walking Dead, for developing the character of Dwight, giving us a little further insight into who this guy is, maybe making us hate him a little bit less. And Jeffrey Dean Morgan continues to ham it up as Negan, who I think is kind of bordering on these classic supervillain tropes. He shows a certain favoritism towards Daryl that I think could ultimately be very destructive for him. And it's like, why exactly are you clinging on to this one guy? But that, he doesn't know Daryl. He doesn't know what he's capable of. And that sort of unknowability kind of fascinates Negan and makes him want to play around with it. I should also note that there's a very interesting assortment of music in this week's episode, which I was quite fond of. I think that there were 3 major songs, and then of course it was the Easy Street, which I am trying very hard to keep out of my head, so I'm not going to let my thoughts linger on that for too long. But yeah, I enjoy it when this show that has such an austere, apocalyptic landscape makes all of these interesting musical choices. And actually, the very first scene when they started playing that song and the camera was zooming in on Daryl's face, I didn't realize at first that was a song that was actually being played as part of his torture. I thought that they were just like trying really hard to like juxtapose the weird La La Land happiness of Negan's sadism with the suffering of Daryl, and I was just like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? But then I understood how they used it, and it made a lot of sense. So that is where I'm going to leave you guys. If there's any glaring details that I did not bring up in this review, the burden falls upon you, my lovely and wonderful and beloved viewers, to bring those things up below so we can all hash it out together. So, you guys take care, and as always, I will be back before you know it.